Welcome to Mr. Hutchings' History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at something I think is really fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be talking about Martin Luther King Jr.'s later years,
Okay.
specifically from 1967 until his assassination in 1968.
Wow.
I know a lot of you are really interested in this period. You know, how did King's vision evolve
hmm
during such like a crazy turbulent time in American history?
Yeah.
And was he still relevant, at this point? Was he starting to kind of fade into the background? Or was something else going on?
Right.
Well, by the end of this deep dive, I think you'll have a much deeper understanding of the challenges that King faced,
Right.
how his vision was expanding, and the different ways historians view this really pivotal point in
Yeah.
his life and the civil rights movement.
This is going to be good. What I find so compelling about these years is that
Yeah.
they completely overturn the simplistic narrative we often hear about King and the whole civil rights movement. Right. This idea of a smooth and steady march toward equality.
Yeah.
The reality was much more messy, full of internal conflicts, and honestly, a lot of really tough questions
Yeah.
about the path forward.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that complexity then.
Okay.
1967,
Yes.
a year of major shifts, wouldn't you say?
Huge year. Yeah, I mean, even the title of King's book that year,
Oh, yeah.
Where Do We Go From Here? I feel like it just captures that sense of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like he was wrestling with a movement that was truly at a crossroad.
At a crossroads, yeah.
You've got the Civil Rights Act,
Right.
the Voting Rights Act, those have passed.
Yeah.
But underneath these incredible legal victories,
Yeah.
these deep inequalities are persisting.
Absolutely. And you have these new voices emerging, right?
Right.
Some of whom were directly challenging King's entire approach.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting.
Here we go.
You're talking about Stokely Carmichael
That's right.
and the rise of Black Power, right?
Yeah.
So how did their approach differ from King's?
I mean, think of it this way, right?
Yeah.
Carmichael and others in the movement were calling for Black self-reliance,
Okay.
even separation from white society,
Mm-hmm.
what they call Black Power.
Right.
And this was a huge contrast to King's vision of integration,
Mm-hmm.
Achieving equality, but within the existing system.
Right.
Carmichael even famously said, Black power means Black people coming together to form a political force,
Wow.
which was a huge departure from King's philosophy.
And it's all happening as King's own definition of freedom is also evolving too, right?
Absolutely.
It wasn't just about legal equality anymore. He
Yeah.
starts talking about economic empowerment as the next frontier.
Yes.
Did the Watts riots a couple of years earlier play a role in that shift?
100%. The Watts riots, I mean, that was a brutal wake-up call.
Yeah.
That dismantling legal segregation, that wasn't enough. King saw those uprisings as a desperate cry for economic justice,
Yeah.
a sign
Yeah.
that true freedom required tackling the inequality that kept Black Americans in poverty.
So it wasn't just about dismantling these legal barriers,
Yeah.
but it was about
It's deeper.
dismantling the systems that kept people
The systems, yeah.
oppressed.
Yeah, the systemic issues. And you can really see that in his Poor People's Campaign.
Okay.
This wasn't just a demand for civil rights anymore.
Yeah.
It was about economic rights as well.
Wow.
So
So demanding a guaranteed annual income for all Americans back in 1968.
think about that.
That's pretty audacious.
It's radical. That was one of his goals.
Wow.
And it really gives you a sense of just how far the Poor People's Campaign
Yeah.
pushed beyond what we think of the traditional civil rights agenda.
Yeah.
King was really calling for a restructuring of American society
Wow.
to uplift everyone in poverty, not just a specific group.
Wow. But he wasn't exactly met with open arms, was he?
No, Scott at all.
You've got Black Power gaining momentum, white backlash is simmering, and then the Vietnam War overshadowing everything.
Right.
It kind of seems like King was facing a perfect storm of opposition.
Yeah, you could say that, pulled in so many directions,
Yeah.
criticized from every side.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crucial to understand that context, because
Yeah.
it adds so much depth
Yeah.
to understanding King's later work.
And speaking of understanding, historians kind of have different
Oh, yeah.
ways of interpreting King's final years, don't they? What are some of those different perspectives?
Totally. I mean, some historians, they call them revisionists.
Okay.
They argue that King's focus on economic justice
Yeah.
wasn't this sudden shift.
Right.
They see it as like a natural progression of his vision,
Okay.
like a deepening of his understanding of what true equality actually meant.
So not a departure, but more like a deepening of the river.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like it was always flowing in that direction.
Yeah, exactly. And historians like Claiborne Carson,
Okay.
they point to the Port People's Campaign, King's work with labor movements,
Yeah.
as evidence that economic equality was always fundamental to his vision of racial justice.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do other historians then explain the fact that
Okay.
it seemed like the movement was fracturing at the same time?
That's where, like, social movement theory comes in.
Uh-huh.
So historians like Alden Morris,
Yeah.
they argue that the emergence of different factions,
Okay.
like Black Power and the anti-war movement,
Yeah.
that wasn't like a failure on King's part,
Right.
but it's actually a natural evolution of any social movement as it like broadens its scope and its tactics.
Oh, interesting. So instead of a movement falling apart, it's more like a seed sprouting into something much bigger.
I like that.
Yeah. And King is still a vital part of that growth.
100%. King's message of nonviolence and love,
Yeah.
that remained incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But now it was existing alongside these other approaches
Right.
that reflected the growing diversity and complexity of the movement.
This is all super fascinating. But what about those who kind of saw King's later years
Okay.
through like a more political lens?
Oh, yeah.
Did his strategic thinking play a role in all this?
Of course. Some scholars, they focus on what we call political pragmatism,
Okay.
and they highlight King's like strategic genius, right?
Mhm.
And his belief in the power of the government
Okay.
to actually create change.
Okay.
Adam Fairclough, for example, he emphasizes that King like needed the government's support
Right.
to achieve his goals.
Well, wasn't there a huge contradiction there?
Oh, absolutely.
He needed the government's help,
Yes.
but his outspoken opposition to the Vietnam War
Right.
alienated President Johnson, like a key ally.
Yeah. It was a major dilemma.
That must have been such a tough balancing act.
Totally. But these historians, they argue that for King, speaking truth to power was just more important
Right.
when being politically savvy.
Yeah.
He couldn't just stay silent about a war
Right.
that he felt was fundamentally wrong,
Right.
even if it meant
Yeah.
risking those political alliances.
Yeah.
Really speaks to his integrity, I think.
Yeah, it shows that he wasn't just like a shrewd political operator,
Right.
but like a man who was deeply
Deeply committed.
committed to his moral
principles.
Yeah. Now, I'm really curious about how historians who study like Black Power specifically,
Okay.
how they view King's role in all of this.
Totally. So historians like Peniel Joseph,
Okay.
they help us understand
Yeah.
why figures like Carmichael
Mm-hmm.
began to see King's commitment to nonviolence
Yeah.
as increasingly out of touch with reality.
Okay.
Right. They were facing a very different situation in the ghettos in the North,
Right.
where police brutality was rampant
Yeah.
and there was just crushing economic despair.
Right.
They felt King's message of love and integration, that it didn't fully grasp that urgent need for self-defense
Right.
and Black empowerment.
So while King was calling for love and integration,
Right.
these younger activists were saying, we need to protect ourselves.
Exactly.
We need to be in control of our own destiny.
Yeah, self-reliance and autonomy.
Yeah.
That was essential for them
Yeah.
to achieve true liberation.
Right.
They believed Black people needed to build their own institutions,
Okay.
control their own communities,
Yeah.
in order to truly be free from oppression.
Right.
And that's a very different perspective than King's.
Yeah.
But it's equally important to understand this period.
Wow. So by 1967, it seems like King was navigating this incredibly complex landscape,
Totally.
almost like he was walking a tightrope over this,
Over a chasm.
yeah,
Yeah.
a chasm. So let's take a closer look at those specific challenges he was up against,
Let's do it.
starting with the rise of Black Power and what it meant for his commitment to nonviolence.
The rise of Black Power, I mean, that really signaled a big shift in tone
Okay.
and tactics of the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
You know, Carmichael's call for any means necessary, right?
Yeah.
That was a direct challenge to King's unwavering faith in nonviolence.
Yeah.
You have to remember, King truly believed that love could conquer hate.
Yeah.
And he saw violence as ultimately self-defeating.
Right.
I mean, he famously said, violence ends by defeating itself.
Those are really powerful words.
They are.
Do you think he sensed that the movement was starting to slip away from his vision?
I think he definitely felt a deep concern about the growing influence of Black power
Yeah.
and the potential for violence to just derail the progress that had been made.
Right.
He understood the anger and frustration that was fueling the movement,
Yeah.
but he also feared that it would lead to more suffering, not liberation.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It must have been just so difficult to see this movement that he helped create evolving in a direction that he felt so strongly against.
It was a time of like immense internal conflict for King,
Yeah.
you know, trying to hold together a movement that was becoming increasingly fragmented
Yeah.
while also facing like mounting pressure from those outside the movement
Right.
who just opposed his message altogether.
Right. And speaking of outside forces, let's talk about the white backlash.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
That was really gaining momentum in the late 1960s, wasn't it?
Totally. Racial unrest,
Yeah.
you know, in places like Detroit and Newark
Yeah.
really sparked a lot of fear and resentment
Yeah.
among a lot of white Americans.
Yeah.
And they started to see the civil rights movement as a threat to their way of life.
Right.
Support for civil rights was declining.
Yeah.
And the movement really faced this growing backlash,
Yeah.
especially in the North.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting because you would think the North would be more progressive.
You'd think so, right? It's interesting because King had warned about this very thing.
Oh, had he?
He did. He said that northern ghettos were, quote, ringed with white suburbs.
Wow.
You know, fueling this racial tension.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about whether those words came back to haunt him, you know?
Yeah.
Did they make some view him as a troublemaker, you know,
Yeah.
by bringing up those issues?
Yeah, it's like he was challenging the North's complacency.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He was exposing this, like, hypocrisy of those who said they supported civil rights,
Right.
but resisted integration in their own communities.
Right.
And, yeah, that definitely made him a target.
And then, of course, we have to address, like, the elephant in the room,
Right.
the Vietnam War,
Yeah.
King's opposition to the war.
Yeah,
That further strained his relationships
absolutely.
and just added this whole other layer of complexity to his work.
Yeah.
What kind of impact did that have?
Well, his speech in '67, denouncing the Vietnam War, that was huge.
Mm-hmm.
He called the United States the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. That sent shockwaves through the nation.
Yeah,
It alienated a lot of his supporters,
just bet.
including President Johnson,
Yeah.
who saw it as a betrayal.
Yeah.
You
Those
know,
words are still so powerful today.
they are.
Can you imagine the impact back then?
Oh, my gosh.
For someone like Martin Luther King Jr. to say that?
Especially him.
Yeah.
It was incredibly bold
Yeah.
and courageous.
Yeah.
You know, he knew that speaking out against the war
Yeah.
would have consequences.
Yeah.
But he felt like morally obligated to do so.
Right.
For King, you know, the Vietnam War
Yeah.
was just fundamentally incompatible with his vision of a just and peaceful world.
Right.
A world where love and nonviolence prevails.
So even though it cost him politically,
Yeah,
he was willing to make that sacrifice for what he believed in.
absolutely. For King, the fight for racial justice,
Yeah.
it couldn't be separated from the fight for peace.
Right.
He couldn't stay silent on something he saw as morally wrong, even if it meant losing allies.
Right.
It just shows his incredible integrity.
Yeah, it really does. And his commitment to his vision.
To his vision, yeah.
It's amazing how he just continued to push forward,
Yeah.
even though he's facing opposition on all these different fronts.
Absolutely.
And so in the face of all of this, he launches the Poor People's Campaign in 1968.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that bold vision.
Okay, so the Poor People's Campaign, this was King's attempt to kind of broaden the scope of the movement, right?
Okay.
To go beyond race and to tackle the root causes of poverty and economic inequality in America.
So it wasn't just a continuation of the fight for civil rights for Black people.
Not just that, no, it was bigger.
It was about something.
It was much bigger.
Bigger.
Think of it as a movement for fundamental human rights.
Okay.
A recognition that everyone deserves the chance to thrive,
Yeah.
regardless of their race or their background.
Right.
King believed that you couldn't truly solve racial injustice
Yeah.
without tackling that broader issue of economic injustice for everyone.
So what were some of the specific things that the campaign was calling for?
They called for some pretty revolutionary things.
Like what?
Imagine in 1968 demanding things like a guaranteed annual income,
Right.
for every American, a massive jobs program
Wow.
to deal with unemployment, affordable housing for low-income families.
Oh.
I mean, these demands were challenging the very fabric of American society.
Wow.
They were questioning, like, the entire way resources were distributed,
Yeah.
you know?
It's no wonder it generated so much controversy.
Of course, right.
Those ideas seem so...
They were light years ahead of their time.
Yeah, it's like he was looking decades into the future.
He was. I mean, even today, some of those ideas are still considered pretty radical.
Yeah.
But for King, they were essential to creating a truly just and equitable society.
Yeah.
He argued that a nation as wealthy as the United States
Yeah.
had a moral obligation to ensure that all of its citizens
Yeah.
had a chance at a decent life, not just basic survival.
So even though the Poor People's Campaign was cut short
Tragically.
by King's assassination, do you think it had a lasting impact?
Absolutely. I think it helped shift the conversation, right? Beyond race and toward a more interconnected understanding of justice.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like he was trying to weave together these different strands of social change, race, economics, peace,
Yeah.
all into a single really powerful tapestry.
Right.
And, you know, his vision of this multiracial movement
Yeah.
fighting for economic equality
Yeah.
that inspired generations of activists
Yeah.
and helped pave the way for movements like Occupy Wall Street, the fight for $15.
So it's not just about the past, it's about,
It's an ongoing story.
yeah, a story that continues today.
Yeah. King's ideas about the connection between racial justice, economic justice, and peace,
Yeah.
those are resonating with activists and organizers today.
Yeah.
You know, he showed us that creating a better world requires us to challenge all forms of oppression and to build bridges across different communities.
And he did all of this without holding elected office.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
A testament to the power of moral leadership.
It really is. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
We've talked about the challenges, the enduring impact of his work.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to step back for a second
Okay.
and talk about King the man.
Yeah.
How did he, like, hold up under all that pressure and scrutiny?
Right.
In those final years, did he ever, like, waver?
That's such an important question because it's easy to forget that King was human.
Right.
He wasn't just this icon.
Right.
You know, he experienced doubt and fear and exhaustion,
Right.
all the things we grapple with.
It's so easy to put these historical figures
I know.
on a pedestal
On a pedestal, yeah.
and lose sight of their humanity.
Yeah. But they were real people
Yeah.
with real challenges and real struggles.
Yeah, and King himself recognized this.
He did.
He once said, and I love this quote. Oh, I love it.
I'm not a saint, unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying.
It's so good.
Right. It makes him feel so
Really?
human.
See?
But knowing all that he was up against,
Right.
the threats, the criticism, the weight of expectations,
Yeah.
where did he find the strength to keep going?
I mean, he drew strength from his faith,
Hmm.
from his family,
Hmm?
from his community, but he also found inspiration in the countless acts of courage
Mm-hmm.
he witnessed among everyday people who were fighting for justice.
Yeah.
You know, he saw the power of collective action
Yeah.
and just the resilience of the human spirit.
So even though he was facing all this intense pressure,
Yeah,
he was able to find sources of strength
yeah,
and support in the people around him.
right. And that's a good reminder for all of us, you know,
Yeah.
that we don't have to face our struggles alone.
Right.
None of us can fight for justice alone.
Yeah.
We need those support networks to get us through.
And to remind us why we're fighting in the first place.
Yeah, so coming back to that idea of King's legacy,
Okay.
how do you think he would want to be remembered?
I think he would want to be remembered not just for his achievements,
Yeah,
but for his unwavering commitment to justice, love, and nonviolence.
yeah,
And he'd want us to remember that fighting for a better world is long
yeah,
and it's hard,
yeah,
but it's absolutely worth it.
right.
And that we all have a role to play in that fight.
And it's a fight that extends beyond
Yes.
specific issues or movements.
100%.
Yeah.
It's about how we choose to live our lives.
Yeah.
You know, how we treat each other
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of world we want to build.
Okay. So we've covered so much already.
We have.
The challenges he faced, the impact of his work.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to highlight before we kind of move on to our final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's crucial to remember
Yeah.
that King's story isn't just about one man. Right? It's the story of a movement. It's a collective struggle for justice.
Yeah.
He was surrounded by countless others
Right.
who fought tirelessly
Yeah.
for equality, and a lot of them never received
Yeah.
the recognition he did.
So while we acknowledge King's leadership,
Yeah.
we can't forget about all those other people who were really the backbone of the movement.
Absolutely.
Huh.
The movement for social justice, it's always a collective effort.
Yeah.
It's a tapestry woven together from countless individual stories.
Yeah.
And it's so important to remember those stories,
Right.
to honor the sacrifices that were made,
Yeah.
and to draw inspiration from their courage.
Yeah. That's such a powerful image.
It is.
A tapestry made up of all these different lives,
Yeah.
each thread contributing to something larger
Absolutely.
and more beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that change doesn't happen in isolation.
No.
It happens through the collective action of everyday people working together for a common purpose.
It does.
And that message feels as relevant today as it was during King's time.
100%.
Yeah.
We're all part of this ongoing story, the fight for justice.
Yeah.
And each of us has to decide what role we're going to play in it.
Okay, you've given us so much to think about today.
It's been a pleasure.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
You know, you mentioned that King's legacy is about more than just the past.
Yes.
It's about the choices we make today.
That's right.
What would a modern-day Poor People's Campaign look like? What issues would it be addressing? How would it be carrying King's vision forward?
Ooh, that's the question, isn't
Yeah.
it? I think that's what King himself would be asking
Yeah.
if he were here today.
Right.
If we look at the core principles of that campaign, economic justice, a living wage, access to health care, decent housing,
Yeah.
it's amazing how relevant those are today.
It's incredible how we've come full circle.
I know.
Like, we're still dealing with
Unbelievable.
so many of these inequalities.
Yeah.
He was fighting against decades ago.
I know. And any modern-day Poor People's Campaign
Yeah.
would have to address how those inequalities have evolved.
Right.
And in some ways, become even more deeply entrenched in our system.
What do you mean by evolved? Give me some examples of how those inequalities
I
are
do.
different today.
Well, for one, the wealth gap. Think about it.
Yeah.
It has just exploded in recent decades.
Right.
The amount of wealth concentrated in the hands of a tiny elite,
Yeah.
it's created this level of economic disparity that would have been hard to imagine
Yeah.
back then.
And technology has added this whole other layer, hasn't it?
Totally.
We've got automation replacing jobs, the gig economy creating a whole new class of workers
Yeah, exactly.
without benefits,
Yeah.
job security.
Right. It's like the rules of the game are constantly changing.
Yeah.
And the nature of work itself is
Right.
changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
So we need to find new solutions to make sure everyone has access to decent work
Right.
that pays a living wage
Yeah.
and provides a pathway to economic security.
Yeah, we can't just rely on these old solutions for problems that are constantly evolving.
Nope, not at all.
And then we can't forget about healthcare.
Healthcare, oh my goodness.
Right. Millions of Americans still don't have access to affordable healthcare.
It's true.
Costs are skyrocketing, even as the system is like cracking at the seams.
Yeah. It's a crisis.
It's a crisis that impacts every corner
Every corner, yeah.
of society.
Healthcare is a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
And we need to create a system that guarantees access to quality care for everyone,
Yeah.
no matter their income or job status.
Right.
It's about recognizing everyone deserves to live a healthy life, not just those who can afford it.
So it
It's
sounds...
kind of wild to think about all the weight King was carrying during those years.
Yeah.
So much pressure, so much scrutiny.
Right.
And it's not surprising that, with all that going on,
Yeah.
some people started to doubt him, question whether his approach was still effective.
That's right. There was even that label some critics use, Martin Luther King.
Oof, yeah.
It's just such a jarring
Harsh.
phrase, you
Yeah.
know, so dismissive
Yeah.
of his accomplishments.
Yeah,
Do historians today
right.
give any credence to that?
Not at all. Actually, there's a growing recognition of how courageous
Yeah.
and groundbreaking King's later work really was.
Okay.
You have to remember, he was pushing far beyond
Yeah.
what many people considered acceptable at the time,
Right.
trying to connect the dots between racial justice,
Mm.
economic inequality,
Yeah.
and world peace.
Wow.
That's a huge, ambitious vision,
Yeah.
even if it, remained unfinished.
So if historians aren't calling him a loser, How do they explain the pushback he was getting?
Right.
Was it simply fatigue after years of fighting, or was there something more to it?
I think there were definitely elements of like fatigue, disillusionment, especially after so many years of struggle,
Right.
where, tangible results felt slow in coming
Yeah.
for many people.
Right.
But you also have to consider this like fundamental shift
Okay.
that was happening in American society itself.
Okay.
That optimism of the early 60s, it was fading.
Right.
The Vietnam War,
Yeah.
that was creating deep divisions.
Mm-hmm.
The economic boom was starting to falter.
Right.
People were getting more anxious,
Mm.
more fearful, less willing to embrace radical change.
So it sounds like King was swimming against a pretty powerful tide
He was.
in those final years.
Yeah.
But even with those setbacks, he never gave up, did he?
And now
Or just kept pushing forward,
kept pushing.
trying to build that more just and equitable world that he envisioned.
That's what makes studying this period so compelling.
Yeah.
It's about resilience,
Yeah.
about a leader grappling with these immense challenges,
Mm.
personal attacks,
Yeah.
but never losing sight of that ultimate goal.
Let's go back to the Poor People's Campaign for a minute.
Okay.
Can you give us like a little more detail about what it actually called for and
Yeah.
why it generated so much controversy?
Imagine you're king in 1968,
Okay.
right? You've seen the limits of legal victories.
Mm-hmm.
You know that true equality demands economic justice.
Okay.
So you launched this campaign,
Yeah.
envisioned as this like multiracial movement,
Okay.
uniting poor and marginalized communities across the country.
Wow.
It's not just about Black Americans anymore.
Right.
It's about addressing the systemic roots of poverty
Okay.
for everyone.
So it's much broader in scope.
Yeah, and much broader.
Rather than simply fighting for civil rights.
Yeah, it's like he's saying we're all in this together
Yeah.
when it comes to economic injustice.
Yeah.
That was exactly the point he was making.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about those structures that create poverty,
Right.
inequality for all, not just fixing a problem for one specific group.
Okay. What were some of the specific things the campaign was demanding?
They were demanding things that even today would be considered pretty radical.
You mentioned guaranteed annual income.
Yeah.
That seems pretty radical for the time.
Oh, yeah, they called for that.
Okay.
But also a massive jobs program to address unemployment
Wow.
and affordable housing
Okay.
for low-income families.
Okay.
So these were big asks,
Yeah.
challenging the very foundations of American society.
No wonder it generated so much controversy.
Oh, yeah.
Did even King's supporters
Yeah.
have mixed feelings about it?
Definitely mixed reactions.
Great.
Some embraced it as this necessary evolution of the movement,
Okay.
while others worried it was too ambitious,
Okay.
spreading the focus too thin,
Right. Right.
maybe even diluting the focus on racial justice.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And remember, this was a time of intense debate
Yeah.
within the movement itself
Yeah.
about the best path forward.
It's fascinating to think about
It is.
all those conversations that
Yeah.
must have been happening.
Oh, yeah.
And here's King trying to navigate
Trying to hold it all together.
all these different
Yeah.
internal disagreements
Yeah.
while also facing external opposition,
Yeah.
even though the Poor People's Campaign was cut short.
Tragically.
By his assassination, do you think it had a lasting impact on the fight for social justice?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
I think it's safe to say it had a profound impact.
Okay.
It helped shift that conversation beyond race
Mm-hmm.
toward a more like intersectional understanding of justice.
Okay.
It's like King's vision of this multiracial movement
Yeah.
fighting for economic equality. It planted seeds
Yeah.
that blossomed into movements like Occupy Wall Street
Right.
and the fight for $15.
Yeah. So even though he was assassinated before it could be fully realized,
Right.
his ideas continue to ripple outward
They do.
and shape movements today.
Yeah, it's like he threw a stone into a pond
Yeah.
and the ripples are still expanding.
Yeah.
Those ideas about linking racial justice,
Mm-hmm.
economic justice,
Mm-hmm.
peace,
Yeah.
they're incredibly relevant
Yeah.
even today.
It's amazing that he accomplished all of this
It is.
without holding any elected office.
Without any official power.
Yeah.
It speaks to the power of moral leadership, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
He wasn't in a position of authority,
Right.
but he inspired millions
Yeah.
to action just through the sheer force of his convictions.
Right. Okay. We've talked about the challenges,
Yeah.
the resilience, the lasting impact,
Mhm.
but I want to shift gears a bit,
Go on.
talk about something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
You said King wasn't just an icon,
Right.
but a human being
Yeah.
with doubts, fears, moments of exhaustion.
It's crucial to remember he was a real person.
Yeah.
not just this figure in
Right.
the history book.
Yeah.
He faced just unimaginable pressure,
Mm-hmm.
scrutiny.
Yeah.
And it's important to acknowledge the toll that must have taken.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't superhuman.
Right.
He was a man who felt deeply and struggled with the same human emotions we all do.
It's so easy to forget that, isn't it?
It is.
To put these historical figures
I know.
up on these pedestals
Yeah, on a pedestal.
and forget that they laughed
Yeah.
and they cried and they worried
Worried.
and they doubted just like we do.
Just like us.
And I think King himself recognized that,
He did.
like that tendency
To
to,
deify him. Yeah.
yeah, there's that famous quote,
I love this one.
I am not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying.
It's so good.
It makes him so relatable.
It does.
But knowing everything he was up against,
Right.
the constant threats,
Yeah.
the criticism,
The weight of the world.
yeah, where did he find the strength to keep going?
I think he found strength in his faith,
Okay.
his family,
Mm-hmm.
and the community of people who shared his vision.
Okay.
But he also drew inspiration from all those everyday people that he met along the way,
Mm-hmm.
those who were risking everything to
Yeah.
fight for justice,
Yeah.
those who just showed incredible courage
Yeah.
in the face of such adversity.
Mhm.
I think it was a reminder
Yeah.
that he wasn't alone.
Yeah.
This was a collective struggle,
Right.
and that together they could make a difference.
It's a good reminder that even when things feel really dark,
Yeah,
we can find strength in each other
absolutely.
and that shared belief that a better world is possible
It is.
and that even small acts of courage,
Yes,
compassion
Mm.
can contribute to that.
you said it perfectly.
Yeah.
King's life is a testament to that power of collective action.
Yeah.
The idea that we are stronger together.
Mm-hmm.
We can achieve so much more
Yeah.
when we work side by side,
Mm-hmm.
supporting and inspiring each other.
And that feels more relevant now
It does.
than ever.
It really does.
Okay, we've talked about the challenges,
Mhm.
the resilience,
Yeah.
the lasting impact.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to highlight before we move on to our final thoughts?
Yes, one more thing I think it's important to emphasize.
Okay.
The King's story isn't just about him.
Okay.
It's the story of a movement.
Right.
He was surrounded by all these people
Yeah.
who fought so hard
Mm-hmm.
for justice,
Yeah.
many of whom never got the same recognition
Right.
as he did.
So while we acknowledge his leadership,
Yeah.
it's crucial to remember all those unsung heroes
Oh, absolutely.
of the civil rights movement.
Yeah, the people who worked behind the scenes,
Yeah.
who organized and protested
Yeah.
and put their lives on the line
Yeah.
for the cause.
Okay.
The movement for social justice.
Yeah.
It's always a collective effort,
Yeah.
a tapestry woven together from all these individual threads.
Right.
It's vital that we remember those stories,
Uh-huh.
honor those sacrifices,
Yes.
draw inspiration
Yeah.
from their courage and resilience,
Mm-hmm.
because they too were part of King's legacy.
That's such a powerful image, you know? This tapestry woven from the threads of so many different lives,
I love it.
contributing to something bigger,
It's beautiful.
more beautiful.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that change doesn't happen in isolation.
No, it doesn't.
It happens through those collective actions of
Yeah.
everyday people
Mm-hmm.
working together toward a common purpose.
Yeah, and that message,
Yeah,
as relevant as ever today,
absolutely.
you know, we're all part of this ongoing story,
Hmm.
this struggle for justice and equality,
Uh,
and we each have a role to play in writing the next chapter.
Like a modern day poor people's campaign, what would that even look like?
Yeah.
What issues would it have to target to like really carry King's vision forward?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would King be demanding if he were here?
Yeah.
You know, if we look at the core of that campaign,
Hmm.
economic justice, living wages, access to health care, decent housing,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing how relevant all of that still is,
It really is.
you know?
Yeah, it's like we've come full circle in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Decades later, still grappling with
Still fighting for the same things.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
same inequalities
that-
he was fighting against.
And a modern day poor people's campaign would have to deal with that,
right.
right? How those inequalities have changed
Right.
and become even more ingrained.
What do you mean by changed? Give me some examples.
Okay, well, think about the wealth gap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's exploded
Right.
in recent decades.
Yeah.
The amount of wealth that's concentrated
Yeah.
in the hands of like a tiny elite,
Right.
it's created a level of disparity that would have been hard to even grasp
Yeah.
back then.
And then you've got technology, right? Adding this whole other
Oh my gosh, yes.
layer of complexity.
Another layer.
Automation, the gig economy.
Right, creating this whole workforce with no stability.
Yeah, no benefits.
Yeah, it's like the rules are constantly changing.
Right. The nature of work is totally different.
Totally different.
And then we can't forget about healthcare.
Oh, healthcare is huge.
It's still an issue for millions of Americans.
Millions.
The costs are crazy.
Yeah, outrageous.
And access is so limited.
Yeah, and the system itself is just struggling.
It feels like it's about to break.
It does. It feels very fragile.
Yeah.
Healthcare is a human right. We have to remember that.
Yeah.
We need a system that guarantees access for everybody,
Yeah.
regardless of income, job, anything like that.
Yeah, recognizing that everyone deserves
Deserves.
to live a healthy life,
Exactly.
not just those who can afford it.
Yes. It's about dignity, you know?
So a modern day poor people's campaign, it wouldn't just be a single issue.
No. Multi-issue, totally.
It would have to tackle all of these things.
Yeah, so many interconnected problems.
Where do you even begin?
I think the first step is just recognizing that, right?
Okay.
That interconnectedness.
Yeah.
You can't solve poverty without healthcare.
Right.
You can't solve healthcare without education. And underlying all of that,
Yeah.
we have to deal with systemic racism and discrimination.
Yeah, it sounds like we have to build these coalitions,
I do.
bring people together from all these different backgrounds
Yes.
to fight for this common goal.
That's it.
It's kind of the same spirit as that original campaign.
The same spirit, yeah. Finding ways to bridge those divides.
Yeah.
Remember, we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
One human family.
King's message of love and unity.
Oh, yeah.
It feels more urgent now than ever,
It does.
you know?
Especially now with all the division and polarization.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we've lost sight of that.
Totally.
Like that we need each other.
We do.
No?
Yeah. We have to rediscover that power of collective action.
Yeah.
That belief that we can achieve more together
Yeah.
than we ever could alone.
Yeah. That's a huge part of his legacy.
It is, and we need to bring that back.
Okay, well, this deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
You know?
Yeah.
It's really helped me see King in this new light.
Yeah. Good, good.
As this complex human being.
Yeah. Not just the icon,
Yeah.
but a real person with struggles and triumphs.
Pushing for change, even when it was hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's been a privilege to share all of this with you.
Yeah.
King's story is so powerful.
It is.
I hope our conversation encourages everyone to learn more
Yeah.
about his life, his work,
And to think about how we can apply his lessons to our
Yes.
own lives
to our own lives.
and our communities.
Yes. Beautifully said.
So thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving for that more just and equitable world.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings' History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.